quoted Psalm 22:16. Dogs have surrounded me, a band of evil men has encircled me. They have pierced my hands and feet. And said the New Testament misquotes that. Because the Hebrew does not say they pierced my hands and feet. It says like a lion, they're at my hands and feet. And the New Testament misquotes that verse. So I looked at him. Don't forget, we got a live audience there. I said, the New Testament doesn't quote that verse. He said, it doesn't? So I quick did a mental concordance check as best as I could. Because now you're suddenly, I mean, I knew it didn't, but suddenly you're challenged like that. And I said, no, it doesn't. He goes, not once? I said, not a single time. And he had this book with him, The Real Messiah, this anti-missionary book, and he just starts flipping through it because he got so flustered. He started flipping through it, and I said to him, you won't find the truth in that. You're going to have to go to the Scriptures. And I couldn't resist just that little dig at that point. He just was flipping through it. This is actually, Psalm 22 is quoted elsewhere in the New Testament, but it's not quoted in terms of verse 16. That's not quoted. First question, why is this even taken as a messianic psalm? It's David talking about his pain and suffering. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from the words of my groaning, I cry out to you. He seems to be forsaken by God and man. Verse 12, many bulls surround me, strong bulls of Bashan encircle me, roaring lions tearing their prey, open their mouths wide against me. I pour it out like water, all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It's melted away within me. He's coming right to the jaws of death. Verse 21, rescue me from the mouth of the lion, save me from the horns of the wild oxen. And now something happens. Verse 22, I will declare your name to my brothers in the congregation. I'll praise you. You fear the Lord, praise him, all you descendants of Jacob. Honor him, revere him, all you descendants of Israel, for he has not despised or disdained the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. From you comes the theme of my praise in the great assembly. Before those who fear you will I fulfill my vows. The poor will eat and be satisfied. They who seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him, for dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. Wait a second. All the nations of the earth are going to turn to the Lord and worship and adoration and praise when they remember how David got delivered from the jaws of death? I think not. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, for he has done it. He's delivered me from death. Well, I believe that this was written with reference to David and his sufferings and deliverance from the jaws of death, and with great enthusiasm and vision and excitement these words were written, but they go beyond David. The Messiah, the ideal righteous sufferer who fulfills the destiny of Israel. The Messiah who is the mirror image of the positive promises to David lived out. The Messiah who embodies the qualities of Israel, the destiny of Israel, the highest, loftiest goals of God. And as it happened to David, so also in a greater, more profound way it happens to the Messiah. And his deliverance from death itself brings praise to God from the ends of the earth. There it is. That's why one of the reasons Yeshua quotes this hanging on the cross is to draw our attention to it. And he quotes those opening words in Aramaic, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's drawing our attention to his suffering. He's drawing our attention to his suffering, the penalty of God's judgment. And he's drawing our attention to this psalm. So we read it and say, whoa, look at this. Even the way he's mocked on the cross, it's exactly the way some of the religious leaders were mocking him. Verse 7, all who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord that the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him since he delights in. This is just what's happening as he's hanging there crucified. Verse 18, they divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. Just what happened. You say, okay, but other people died. Other people had their clothing divided. Other people were persecuted. Other people suffered. Yeah, but no one was delivered to the point. Hear it again. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before him. No one was delivered in such a way that has caused the universal praise to God, caused nations and peoples to come to him and worship, celebrate this great deliverance from death. It's a wonderfully messianic song. Some of the rabbis interpret it with reference to the nation of Israel as a whole. But clearly, in its original intent, David, speaking of terrible suffering, deliverance from it, bringing great praise to God, it reaches its fulfillment through Messiah and nobody else, no other choice, no other possibility. But what about verse 16? Why did the Christian translators have to mess with it? The New Testament never quotes verse 16. Why do they have to change what the Hebrew says? So let's take a look at some of the quotes here from Rabbi Singer. According to Rabbi Singer, missionaries are confronted with another remarkable problem as they seek to project the words of the psalm into a first-century crucifixion story. In the simplest terms, this text that Christians eagerly quote is not a prophecy, nor does it speak of any future event. This entire psalm, as well as the celebrated psalm that follows it, contains a dramatic monologue in which King David cried out to God from the depths of his personal pain, anguish, and longing as he remained a fugitive from his enemies. Accordingly, the stirring monologue in this chapter is all in the first person. The author himself is crying out to God. There is no doubt who the faithful speaker is in the psalm. The very first verse in the chapter explicitly identifies this person as King David. Again, I agree. Initially, it's spoken by David about his own sufferings, but the reality of it points way beyond David. And Rabbi Singer fails to mention that some rabbinic interpretation reads this as a picture of Israel and its history. He fails to mention that. Needless to say, the phrase, "they pierced my hands and my feet," is a Christian contrivance that appears nowhere in the Jewish scriptures. Bear in mind, this stunning mistranslation of the 22nd Psalm did not occur because Christian translators were unaware of the correct meaning of the Hebrew word. Clearly, this was not the case. It must be noted that the authors of the New Testament were not responsible for inserting the word pierced into the text of Psalm 22:17. It's verse 17 in the Hebrew because that opening line for the director of music becomes a verse in Hebrew, so it moves everything up one verse. This verse was undoubtedly tampered with years after the Christian canon was completed. The insertion of the word pierced into the last clause of this verse is a not too ingenious Christian interpolation that was created by deliberately mistranslating the Hebrew word ka'ari, like a lion, as pierced. So that's the argument. So where do these diabolical Christian Bible translators get this from? And they got to twist the text and change it, and rewrite it. Okay, first thing, let's just read it the way it's written in the majority of our Masoretic manuscripts. By the way, if you look at this Hebrew Bible, people say this is the Masoretic text. Translations are based on the Masoretic text. Here, I'm going to destroy a little myth here. Well, my Bible is based on the Masoretic text. Listen, every Bible translation is based on the Masoretic text. In other words, the Hebrew Bible as we have it, okay? However, there is no such thing as the Masoretic text. The Masoretes, his very name means transmitters or traditionalists, primarily in the early Middle Ages, right before that, early Middle Ages, they were the ones responsible for copying the Hebrew manuscripts and passing them on. They had several different systems of how they put the vowels in, depending on where they were. And they had thousands and thousands of manuscripts which have minor variations between them. There is no such thing as the Masoretic text. There is the Masoretic textual tradition, which is an amazing harmony, which is carefully preserved.